Welcome, everybody, to the Building the Village podcast, where we are going to be talking about talking today. I know it's been a minute. I know it's been a while, but we are back and better than ever. And so if you're new to the Village family, welcome. If you like today's content or any other content that's available, please be sure to like, comment, and also subscribe. And for those of you who are not strangers to the Village, you're part of the family, make sure that you're sharing this episode with people that you feel like would benefit from this content. So, as I said, we're going to be talking about something that is near and dear to my heart. It's something that I got in trouble for quite a bit growing up in school and a little bit today, especially with my wife and kids. And that's one of my favorite subjects. Talking. I'm one of those people that got in a lot of trouble. It was on my report card. Does great student, but talks too much. However, somewhere along the line, not with me, but somewhere along the lines, I feel like we have lost the art of talking. And y'all know how we do in the Village. I'm trying to make sure that we're building better villages, one villager at a time. And I think talking is something that we got to get back to doing. And so what I want to start by saying is that I've noticed that we're living in a time and in a world where communication is constant, but conversation is actually becoming increasingly rare. Y'all, we're sending text messages all the time. In fact, a lot of us prefer to have text messages over phone calls. And honestly, I'm guilty of that. If it can be a text message, make it a text message. Call me on the phone where necessary, right? We are social media driven. And so we do a lot of direct messaging, or DMs as people like to call it. And then, of course, on social media, we like to react rather than respond. We like to comment, and we consume a lot of content, but a lot of us are having less and less meaningful conversations. And so this episode, I'm excited because this episode is going to explore why talking still matters and what we've lost when we stop engaging with each other. Because the reality is if we stop talking, if we stop communicating, the village falls apart. And I want to show you all how everyday conversations can not only help rebuild connection, but how they can also build trust and community. But before we dive into the solutions, I want to point out the challenges. And so if you're rocking with us again, if you're just tuning in, listen, make sure you're liking, commenting, and subscribing, because this is going to be important. I think that what we're going to talk about today is going to benefit your team, your organization, your family, your classroom. All of these are things that I feel like everybody, regardless of the village that you've built around yourself, can benefit from. Okay, so let's talk about the challenges. I think the first challenge that we all encounter is that we've confused communication with connection. Okay, we've confused communication with connection. Now, I would say never before, but I might be wrong about this, but it seems like I've never really seen all these different ways that we have to communicate with people. We've got a lot of different ways that we can communicate. It can be through instant messaging. It can be through FaceTiming. It can be through still written means or through emails or whatever. But we've got a lot of ways that we can connect. The pandemic showed us we can connect on Zoom, through video game networks and communities. And I like the fact that we have a lot of options. However, what I'm also finding is that we often mistake just texting as actual talking, or reacting for actual engagement, or following or subscribing as actual knowing. And then, of course, visibility, we've replaced that. We've made that be belonging. One of the things that I believe would really help us overcome these challenges is, first, we've got to understand the difference between communication and conversation. I know one of the ways that I wanted to talk about this was understanding understanding the difference between communication and connection. But I feel like effective communication and good conversation can lead to meaningful connection, because the reality is this. Communication is simply just the transfer of information. That's all it is. We can do that in a variety of ways. We can use AI to communicate information. We can send an email to communicate. We can send signals that can transfer information. But it's when we have conversation where there's dialogue of some sort that's happening between individuals, where those conversations can actually build relationships. And conversation actually creates opportunities where we can do those things that I talked about earlier, like building trust, building and establishing an understanding between an individual or groups of individuals, where we can practice empathy, where we can facilitate belonging, and more importantly, where friendships are actually built. Ain't that something? I need to actually talk to people in order to make friends. That's a challenge for somebody out there, because I understand that communication can be different and difficult for people. But as we continue to talk, I want to encourage you to think about the ways you can lean in and actually apply the solution that I just proposed. Okay. Here's the second part. The second challenge is that we've become less comfortable actually talking to people. When I was coming up and when I was going to college, we were paying for ringtones, so that when people called us, we had a custom ringtone, or if you had your favorite rap song or your favorite jazz song or whatever that played anytime somebody called. Now, I've got friends who haven't had their phones off silent since before the pandemic, because we don't want phone calls. We prefer a text message, and we've actually become less comfortable talking. And many people, the reality for a lot of people, my daughter is like this, but the reality is for a lot of people, they feel awkward starting a conversation. And if you've got groups of people who are, if you go back to the old days, as my students say, and you're at a party or you're at the skating rink, guys on one wall, girls on the other, nobody wants to be the person that starts and gets rejected first, or nobody wants to be the person that gets it wrong. And one thing that I tell my students at the university all the time is this is what this institution was built on. It was built on being able to disagree. It was built on getting some things wrong, because if you get it right on the first try every time, are we really learning? And so it's not that people are incapable of starting conversations, but I just feel like because of the pandemic and a bunch of other things, people have just gotten out of practice, and we've gotten fewer opportunities, or we take advantage of less opportunities to actually talk to strangers. I just made somebody nervous saying that, right? How many of you know your neighbors on both sides of your house or your apartment complex? A lot of us are scared to engage with our coworkers. We just go to work, go to lunch, and go do our jobs and go home. And if that works, that's your thing. But if you want to build connection, you've got to, as my pastor says, break the sound barrier with your mouth. And then lastly, a lot of us struggle to actually sit down without distractions, because our cell phones are a vehicle, or they're a tool rather, that gives us access to the world, but it's also a tool that can become very distracting. So what do we do? Well, some of you are saying right now, Brandon, how do we overcome this challenge? You're going to have to normalize awkwardness. I did that pause for dramatic effect, because they always teach you don't want any dead space, but I intentionally put that there. You've got to normalize the awkwardness. And the reason why we've got to normalize it is because if it's a normal part of the learning process in class, or a part of your team, or getting to know your new organization, or helping people get onboarded, if awkwardness is kind of a part of it, then people won't feel as bad. A lot of people feel awkward simply because the conversations aren't perfect. But can I pause for a second and just remind everybody out there that real connection does not require perfection. It does not require perfection because it's going to be awkward. If I just met you, there's no way in the world I'm going to know I got to lower my volume when I'm talking to this person, or I need to speak up until I start to read the verbal and visual cues. I'm not going to know those things. And so be okay with being awkward. We're getting ready to, right now we're in orientation season at the universities all across the world because we're transitioning. We're in the summer months and we're transitioning into the fall semesters here in another month or so. And so a lot of students are going to be going to college for the very first time, and they're trying to figure out how things are going to be less awkward or how to avoid the awkwardness. And my advice is don't try to avoid the awkwardness, lean into it. And so I'm reiterating that connection does not require perfection. It just requires that you try. And so conversation, remember this, conversation is a skill. These are things we learn. We were literally trained in school, in elementary school, at least back when we were coming up, how to actually talk to people, how to write letters, how to send emails, all of those things, because the reality is that the village is not the village without people. I'm going to say that again. The village is not the village without people. And the only way people are going to come together is if some form of conversation and communication is happening. And how do you improve the skill of conversation? Repetition. All right. So let's make sure we practice that skill. All right. Here's the third challenge. And this is important to me. All right. This third challenge is this. We've stopped noticing the people around us. One of the unintended side effects or consequences of a busy schedule and being addicted to the digital life is that we often move through life and time and space. I know that sounds real Star Trekky, but humor me for a second. We often move through life, time, and space without engaging the people within it. We can literally go throughout our day, go throughout our work week, go throughout our vacations, all these different things, and seeing people every day, but not really seeing them. And so the solution that I'm going to offer to this is going to be rooted in horrible English. OK, so I know I got some family friends back home in East Texas that listen to this and they know my English teachers. And so if you're watching this, just humor me, Miss Taylor, for a second. All right. Listen, we've got to become better noticers. That sounded weird, right? But think about it. I've got to be a better noticer. I've got to be a better person that notices my coworkers. I've got to notice that my coworker who's usually happy or upbeat for the last couple of days hadn't been happy and upbeat. I've got to notice that student that used to be in class every day and had perfect attendance that's suddenly not turning in homework and suddenly not appearing, or suddenly changes in their appearance. Those things matter. I've got to notice my neighbor. I haven't seen my neighbor leave the house in a week, or it's been a month since I've seen my neighbor come outside. This is why welfare checks exist, folks. Notice that cashier that's ringing you up and checking you out at your favorite store. That church member who gets up and leaves super fast before the benediction. They're already gone. Or that parent that's on the sidelines at the games. We've got to be better noticers of the people around us, because this is how the village gets better. This is how the village gets stronger. It's when I use my gifts, my eyes, my eyesight, my gifts of observation to see the people around me and to actually engage with them in a meaningful way. All right. Here's the last challenge. OK, the last challenge is this. We want deeper relationships, but a lot of us choose to skip the process. I'm going to say that again. A lot of us out there want deeper relationships, but we keep choosing to skip the process. I told you earlier, it's going to be awkward. And because it's awkward, a lot of us just go about avoiding actually engaging and conversing with people. We want authentic relationships. We want strong communities. We want meaningful relationships, but we overlook how those relationships begin. Listen, I have never started a relationship with vulnerability. And I don't think a lot of us can do that unless we're under some extreme circumstances, right? Relationships won't start with vulnerability, but curiosity is a great place to start. And so the solution, in my opinion, is appreciate the actual value of an ordinary conversation. Now, I'm not saying make small talk. I was going to title this episode The Death of Small Talk, but I've realized that a lot of people are scared of small talk or don't like small talk. But the reality is that small talk can be the front porch to connection. It can be that very thing that gets you connected to a person. But I understand a lot of people who don't like small talk. In my experience, in my coaching, in my working with students, in my development of staff, I've learned that the people who hate small talk the most are the people that want deeper connection the most. And so appreciate the value of the seemingly ordinary, because trust is going to take time. It's going to take time. We got to start somewhere. We wouldn't get to those deep relationships. Think about your best friend. Y'all didn't start off as best friends. Time made you best friends. Experience, all those different things, being in the trenches, having some experiences together. My pastor said something to me about a month ago, and I've never forgotten this. He said this. He said, intimacy is the reward of shared struggle. That means that people who I've struggled with, people that we've had some disagreements with for whatever reason we've disagreed, if we don't let that disagreement divide us, it can be something that actually brings us together. Doesn't our country need that right now? Doesn't our world need those kinds of connections right now? And so I want to challenge you to think about something. I'm going to close here. I want to challenge you to think about this week. Who around you might be one conversation away from feeling more connected? Who is somebody in your life, at work, at church, at home, that, man, one more conversation might make the difference? If you lean into that question and you actually come up with a person or an individual, I want to challenge you to reach out to them. There's a reason why they came to your mind. Now, I'm not asking you to become best friends, although that's a possibility. But what I am saying is that, again, the village is not the village without the people. And it's going to take talking to get us to that point. And so let's get back to talking, because not every conversation is going to change a life, but every conversation and every meaningful relationship is going to begin with one conversation. Listen, if you got something out of this episode, if this blessed you, or if you're like, man, this is really helpful, we could use this, I want you to like it. Click that like button. That like button lets me know that you got something from it. And if you're one of those people that's not my mom, because my mom always comments, but if you're one of those people that wants to comment, please, by all means, put a comment there for me. Reach out via social media at B Jones Speaks, or however you want to reach out. Let me know if you got something from it, but I want to hear from you. I want to know if this was a blessing, and if it was, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share. All right. Until next time, y'all take care of yourselves and each other. God bless. Hey, everybody, if you like today's episode, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. And then also go to my link tree at B Jones Speaks. You can also follow me on Instagram at B Jones Speaks. And if you're not already doing so, make sure that you're subscribing on YouTube at, you guessed it, B Jones Speaks. See you next time.